Every morning at the same time, he would come to the town library, straighten his uniform, open the door, and stand guard in silence. No one knew his name, no one talked to him. Until a young man noticed a medal shining in his jacket pocket. What does that medal hide? And why is this man hiding in the most ordinary place in town? Welcome to Human Stories. Before we begin, share in the comments which city you're watching this video from today. And if you believe these stories need to be remembered, subscribe so we can keep them alive. Maplewood, Ohio, was a place nestled among cornfields, where the wind gently rustled. On the main street were a diner, a gas station, a VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, hall, and an old red brick building housing the library. The library was the heart of the town. Wooden shelves, dusty newspaper archives, old carpets, and the faint scent of coffee filled the space. The doors opened at 7 a.m., but he was always there by 6:45. He wore a gray security uniform, had a slight hunchback, and carried a rusty thermos. His name? Most people didn't know. The library staff called him Uncle Jack, and no one used any other name. He didn't say hello, he didn't smile, he just nodded slightly and sat down at his desk at the entrance. High school students teased him, whispering, "Uncle Jack is on duty again." Adults didn't look at him, treating him as if he were an old lamp in the library. But the library director, Susan Mitchell, had noticed something in his movements. His steps were slow, but it was as if he was always scanning his surroundings. His eyes scanned everyone who entered the door, but he didn't disturb them. There was always a slight bulge in the inner pocket of his jacket. No one had ever wondered about it. Until that morning. That morning was the last day of November 2025. The weather was cold, the leaves had fallen, and the town was shrouded in a gray silence. Ethan Parker, a senior in high school, was doing research in the library for a history assignment. He was preparing for college and needed old newspaper archives for a presentation on the Gulf War, 1991. As he walked between the shelves, his eye caught Jack's desk. Jack had taken off his jacket to fill his thermos. The jacket was hanging over the edge of the desk, and a small, metal object fell out of the inner pocket onto the floor. Ethan approached. There was something shiny on the floor, on the carpet. He bent down and picked it up. It was a medal. Old, with worn edges, but the inscription was clear, Bronze Star, 1991. Ethan froze. This was no ordinary badge. This was something earned through extraordinary courage. Jack, holding the jacket, looked at him. He didn't smile, just said, "You dropped this, son," as Ethan handed him the medal. Jack took it slowly, put it in his pocket, and said, "Thank you." But there was a weight in his voice. As if that medal had opened a door that had been closed for years. Ethan couldn't sleep that night when he returned home. The medal wouldn't leave his mind. He picked up his phone and searched for 1991 Bronze Star. What came up was an operation where an American Ranger unit had rescued 12 soldiers trapped behind enemy lines during the Gulf War. The names were censored, the files classified. But one detail caught his attention: the operation leader had an old Ranger tattoo on his arm. Ethan remembered Jack's arm. Once, when his uniform sleeve had slipped, he had seen a faint tattoo, a dagger and wings. Was it a coincidence? Or was this security guard a hero hidden in the dusty pages of history? The next morning, Ethan went to the library early. Jack was sitting at his desk, thermos in hand, watching the door. Ethan gathered his courage. "Sir," he said, his voice trembling, "that medal. Is it from the Gulf War?" Jack paused. He set his thermos on the desk. His eyes locked on Ethan's, but he wasn't angry. Just tired. "Some people want to forget," he said, his voice low but clear. "But some things can't be forgotten." Ethan swallowed. "Are you that officer? The one who saved 12 people?" Jack didn't answer. He bowed his head slightly and turned back to his desk. But in that moment, the atmosphere in the library changed. It was as if everyone had begun to feel the weight of that silent man. Ethan went to the library early every day that week. He noticed the discipline in Jack's movements. There was an order to everything he did, from opening the door to sitting at his desk to holding his thermos. It was as if every movement was a ritual. Ethan decided to talk to the library director, Susan. "What do you know about Uncle Jack?" he asked. Susan paused for a moment. "John Carter. He's a quiet man. He's been here for 8 years. He does his job, doesn't talk much. But, sometimes he looks like he's in another world." Ethan described the medal. Susan's eyes widened. "A medal? Are you sure?" Ethan nodded. Susan added, "Once, a thief tried to break in. Jack caught him like it was child's play. His hands didn't shake, his eyes didn't even blink." Ethan did some deeper research online that night. Military forums, old news articles, censored reports. During the 1991 Gulf War, a Ranger unit had been trapped in northern Iraq. The operation leader was Captain John Carter. He had rescued 12 soldiers, staying under fire all night long. His name was censored in the files, but a comment on a forum caught his attention: "That man carried us on his back. He didn't stop even as bullets rained down. He received the Bronze Star, but he never wore it." Ethan felt his heart racing. Uncle Jack was Captain John Carter. But why didn't anyone know about it? Why was he quietly standing guard in a library? Ethan decided to share Jack's story with the town. He talked to his high school friends first. Most of them didn't believe him. "Uncle Jack? He's just a security guard," they said. But Ethan didn't give up. At the local VFW hall, he connected with an elderly veteran. The man was retired Sergeant Frank Larson, and he knew Jack. "John. He's a quiet man. But his eyes. Those are eyes that have seen war." Ethan told the story. Frank listened, nodding. "We need to share this at the VFW meeting," he said. The next VFW meeting became a turning point for the town's veterans. Ethan gathered his courage and spoke about Jack's medal, his tattoo, and his possible past. The hall fell silent. An elderly veteran, his body scarred from Vietnam, stood up. "I know John Carter," he said. "In 1991, in Iraq. That night, he saved 12 men. I was one of them." The room erupted in a buzz. Ethan felt his heart pounding in his chest. Jack's story was no longer just a rumor. It was real. 1991, Iraq. The night is dark, the air heavy with sandstorms. Captain John Carter leads a 12-man Ranger unit. Their mission is to rescue a stranded unit behind enemy lines. The radio is silent, there is no air support. Jack looks at his team. Each of them trusts his orders. "Move out, no one stays behind," he says. Bullets are flying, but Jack doesn't stop. He carries one soldier on his back, supports another by the arm as he's wounded. They walk 12 kilometers through the night. Jack has shrapnel in his leg, but he doesn't stop. By dawn, all 12 soldiers are alive. Jack receives the Bronze Star, but he doesn't talk about that night. Those files remain classified. When Jack recalls that night, he closes his eyes. The smell of sand, the taste of gunpowder, the screams of his friends are still in his ears. But he doesn't speak. Because speaking would mean reliving those memories. And Jack has been trying to forget for years. The story began to spread in Maplewood. Ethan reached out to the local newspaper, the Maplewood Chronicle. Reporter Lisa Hayes researched Jack's story and published an article, "Maplewood's Silent Hero." The library was no longer just a library. People began coming to see Jack. He greeted them, smiled. One morning, a note at the library door, to Captain Carter, "Thank you for everything you've carried silently." Jack took the note, put it in his pocket. But that day, there was a sparkle in his eyes. As if the weight of the years had lifted for a moment. When Jack returned from the war, he brought only silence with him. PTSD had permeated every corner of his life. He would startle at sudden noises and wake up drenched in sweat at night. His daughter Sarah could never understand why her father had withdrawn into himself. As a child, she wanted to hug him, but Jack was always a few steps behind. "He's a cold person," her mother would say. "As if he has no heart." Years passed, the bond between them grew thin, and eventually broke. When Jack moved to Maplewood, all he wanted was silence. The order in the library was a refuge for him. Each book was like a silent friend. No one asked questions, no one delved into his past. One day, Ethan came to Jack's house under the pretext of research. A photograph in the old, simply furnished house caught his attention. 12 soldiers on sandy terrain. Jack in the middle, with a young man with blonde hair beside him. Just as Ethan was about to ask, Jack spoke. His name was Neil. "He was my best friend. That night, I couldn't bring him back." Ethan fell silent. He now knew that Jack's silence was not just a habit, but a burden of grief. Maplewood was no longer the same town after learning Jack's true story. Those sitting in the diner turned their heads when Jack entered, looking at him with respect. The waiters silently placed a hot cup of coffee in front of him and didn't take any money. Those who once whispered behind his back now remained silent in his presence. The veterans at the VFW hall declared Jack an honored guest at their weekly meetings. For the first time, Jack attended a meeting. The elderly soldiers stood up and saluted. Jack bowed his head, his eyes misting over, but he still didn't speak. When Ethan told Jack's story on the local radio, the listeners couldn't hold back their emotions. Calls increased, newspapers ran headlines. The library began to resemble a shrine. People left notes, small flags, and flowers on Jack's desk. But Jack was uneasy. "I'm not a hero, Ethan," he said one day, looking at the notes. "I just did my job. The real heroes didn't come back." When Ethan shared Jack's story on a veterans forum, he thought only a few people would read it. But his post quickly began to spread. Comments, shares, messages of support. Then a podcast producer reached out to Ethan. The program, titled America's Forgotten Faces, featured Jack's quiet heroism. The broadcast reached millions. Jack was initially uncomfortable with the attention. "I didn't fight to be in the spotlight," he said. But Ethan's honesty softened him. "Don't mention my name," Jack said, "but you can tell the story." Months later, a familiar stranger arrived in Maplewood one morning. Sarah. Jack's daughter, whom he hadn't seen in years. After hearing what was said on the podcast, she wanted to learn the truth. She came to the library, saw her father, and tried to understand for the first time. She sat quietly beside him. Jack turned his head. Their eyes met. The years of resentment gave way to a silent forgiveness. The weight on Jack's shoulders lifted for the first time. Maplewood held a quiet but meaningful ceremony for Jack. A plaque was placed at the library entrance, "Captain John Carter, Silent Hero." VFW members and local residents gathered, but Jack was not there. When he arrived the next morning, he noticed the plaque. He stood there for a moment, his eyes filling with tears. Then, for the first time, he smiled slightly. That evening, Ethan gave Jack a letter. "Even if you don't speak, your story speaks for itself." Jack read the letter, raised his head, and softly said, "Perhaps it's time to speak." Jack is still at the library every morning at 6:45 a.m. But now people don't bow their heads or call him Uncle Jack. Everyone respectfully calls him Captain. His presence transforms the library from an ordinary place into the heart of the town, a meeting point for silent heroes. Ethan starts college but doesn't lose touch with Jack. They occasionally exchange letters and sometimes have long phone conversations. Jack no longer turns away the questions young people ask him. One day, he holds a small meeting with high school students. That day, for the first time, he speaks of his own volition, war changes the silent ones the most. But the real issue is not leaving each other behind. There is pain in his eyes, but also hope. The camera turns to the plaque in front of the library. Ethan's voice is heard as a voiceover. Have you ever met someone like Jack? Someone who quietly performs acts of heroism? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because their stories are our stories.